They called her just the delivery girl until the most feared man in Boston stepped out of 3 black SUVs. Harper had been ignored by her family her entire life, but this time they made one mistake too many. They stole her work, mocked her pain, and handed her an eviction notice during her sister's luxury wedding. Roman Calder walked into the tent without raising his voice, without making a threat, and somehow every millionaire in the room stopped breathing. The elite laughed at the quiet baker at her sister's Newport wedding, not knowing the most feared man in Boston was about to walk through the doors before Roman Calder arrived. Harper Quinn stood alone beside the cake she had spent 61 sleepless hours creating, listening as Vanessa told everyone it had come from Paris. Below the cliffs, the ocean struck the rocks in hard, cold waves. Under the glowing tent, 200 guests smiled as if cruelty were just another kind of entertainment. Harper knew that hollow feeling too well. Being needed when there was work to do, then erased the moment the work was finished. But the silence that night had not begun beneath the wedding tent. It had started long before Roman stepped out of his dark car. It began in a rented kitchen in Providence at 3:17 in the morning, with flour scattered across the floor and Harper's hands shaking from exhaustion. Outside, the damp street slept under weak street lamps. Inside, the refrigerator hummed like an old machine refusing to die. Harper stared at the 6 tiers of almond sponge, brushed with champagne syrup and wrapped in ivory buttercream. Each sugar peony had been shaped petal by petal, then traced with thin gold vines that looked like sunlight caught in lace. She had given 61 hours of her life to that cake, her sleep, her savings, just to please a sister who treated her generosity as if it were something already owed. She had done everything Vanessa asked, and now it was finished. Harper stepped back, her spine aching, her apron dusted white from waist to knee. Her fingers burned from painting the last flower. But in that quiet room, the pain no longer mattered. The cake was not merely useful. It was beautiful. A small, rare smile touched her lips, then vanished when the kitchen door swung open. Celeste Quinn entered without knocking, wrapped in an expensive cream wool coat, her pearls flawless, her perfume arriving before her voice. "You're still here," she said. Harper wiped her hands and explained that she was checking the structure. Celeste's cold eyes moved over the bowls and sugar-dusted counters. Disapproving of the messy truth behind honest work, Celeste looked at the cake last. For one foolish second. Harper waited for warmth. Her mother only tilted her head. "It photographs well," she said. Harper swallowed her disappointment and began explaining how the natural light would catch the gold. But Celeste cut her off. Vanessa wanted elegance, not drama. She studied a sugar peony without touching it, because curiosity about Harper's heart had never been one of her habits. "It looks expensive," Celeste added. When Harper whispered thank you, her mother's lips tightened. "Do not make tomorrow complicated." The threat came wrapped in a gentle voice. Harper was too emotional, Celeste said. Harper answered that she would be fine, already feeling the old sting of being treated like a problem to manage. Celeste reminded her of the pressure, the expectations of the Whitmore family, and Preston's political partners. "This is Vanessa's wedding," Harper whispered. Her mother nodded, as if Harper had finally learned the only lesson that mattered. Harper looked at the cake and wanted to say she understood pressure better than any of them. She had canceled 2 paid orders, changed recipes whenever Vanessa changed her mind, and walked to work in freezing rain just to afford the edible gold. Instead, she stayed quiet. Then Celeste mentioned the dress waiting at Harper's apartment. No alterations. When Harper asked what dress she meant, Celeste's gaze turned icy. "You are not a bridesmaid." The sentence was soft, but it cut clean. Harper looked down at her hands as Celeste lowered her voice into that practiced tone she used whenever she wanted cruelty to sound like guidance. "Vanessa wants the photographs balanced." Harper understood. Vanessa wanted her there enough to look like family, but not polished enough to draw the eye. Celeste touched Harper with 2 cold fingers before leaving her alone in the freezing kitchen. Staring at the cake, Harper thought how strange it was that Sugar and Wire could feel more carefully loved than the family she had been born into. When the morning sky turned pale blue, she drove back to Boston, letting the cold wind slap her awake. Her apartment sat above an old, silent tailor shop in East Boston. It was one narrow room with a slanted ceiling and a radiator that hissed as if it resented her. The rent was lower than anything else because the building belonged to her father, a man who still made sure she paid on time every month and reminded her that his help was a mercy she barely deserved. When she saw the cheap garment bag hanging from her doorknob, Harper froze. For a moment, she thought about walking past it, leaving the humiliation outside. But her family was waiting inside that bag, along with all their polished expectations and quiet disappointments. She unlocked the door and carried it in. The dress was dull silver, flat and stiff, like cheap wrapping paper against her hands. It hung from her shoulders in a shape that made her look plain and awkward. A note had been pinned to the front. Wear this. Don't improvise. Don't embarrass me. V. Harper sat on her bed, surrounded by the small evidence of her life. Recipe notebooks, a cracked laptop, and the face-down photo from the culinary school she had never been able to finish. She wanted to call Vanessa and refuse. She wanted to wear something that felt like herself. Then her phone buzzed with a warning from her sister. Please don't make tomorrow weird. Staring at the note, Harper remembered being 14. Baking Vanessa a chocolate cake through the night in a cold kitchen where she was barely allowed to touch the proper tools. Vanessa had laughed at that cake. Not cruelly, exactly, but carelessly, with a little pity in her voice. Oh, Harp, that's sweet. But we already ordered one, she had said, just as Preston walked in with an expensive bakery box. Harper's cake sat untouched on the counter until the frosting began to melt. The memory faded, but the ache stayed. Now she hung up the ugly silver dress and showered until her skin burned. She tried to sleep, but her mind kept counting the same old sums. How many hours she had given. How many times she had mistaken being useful for being loved. By noon she stopped trying. She carried 2 fresh pastry boxes to the rehearsal brunch at the harbor, answering yet another last-minute demand to serve. The hostess did not see a guest when she looked at Harper. She saw a delivery girl and pointed her toward the cold service entrance. Even when Harper explained she was with the Quinn party, she was sent through the dark hallway behind the dining room. Inside, everything smelled of money, silk and old names. Vanessa sat laughing with her new family, while the men stood by the windows like portraits that breathed. When Harper set down the pastry boxes and a bridesmaid praised them, Vanessa quickly brushed it off as Harper's little creative hobby. Then Celeste stepped up behind her and pressed 2 cold fingers into her spine, forcing her to stand straighter, treating her own daughter like a flaw in an otherwise perfect photograph. Across the room stood Preston Quinn, wearing a smile built from real estate money and favors no one wrote down. He acknowledged Harper only when the senator's wife asked about her, with a charming, empty grin. He erased 27 years of work, debt and sweat in hot rented kitchens by saying Harper was still finding her direction. It hurts differently when the people who should be proud of your passion treat it like a phase. To them, Vanessa was successful because she was marrying wealth. Harper was drifting because she made things with her hands. The senator's wife gave her a pitying smile and said creative souls needed time. Harper looked down at the crumbs on the plate and agreed, then spent the next 2 hours pouring coffee like hired help. That afternoon, she played the invisible assistant, fixing torn ribbons and carrying heavy boxes. The worst moment came when the photographer asked her to step out of the frame so the immediate family could get a clean shot. No one corrected him. No one said she belonged there. Driving back to Providence in the rain, Harper felt rejection press against her chest like a stone. Then her phone buzzed. Roman Calder had texted, "Are you still making beautiful things for people who don't deserve them?" They had met 6 months earlier at a charity gala, when Harper had been nothing more than a nameless pair of hands carrying trays through back hallways, while the wealthy donors left through the front. She had been working since dawn that day. Celeste had attended as a guest and spent the night pretending not to know her own daughter, except when she pulled Harper aside to criticize the dessert table. Exhausted and ashamed, Harper had escaped to the dirty loading dock to cry in the dark. That was where Roman Calder found her. He was powerful, dangerous, dressed in a dark suit. The kind of man people lowered their voices to discuss. Shipping, construction, other things no one named directly. Yet when he found her crying, he did not look away. When she tried to apologize and move out of his path, he simply asked what she was running from. Then he lifted the heavy tray from her hands and set it gently on a wooden crate. He asked who had made her cry. Harper lied. But Roman knew better. When she finally admitted, her mother had treated her like hired help. Something cold and familiar moved across his face. He understood that kind of pain. Under the dim service light, he handed her his card and said that if she ever needed real help, she should call. When she asked why a stranger would care, his answer stayed with her. He said he knew what it looked like when someone was drowning in plain sight. Harper kept the card but never used it. Now sitting in the rain with his message glowing on her phone, she read his words again and again, warmed by the dangerous comfort of being seen. Back in the Providence kitchen, the wedding cake stood immaculate. Harper checked the temperature, tested the supports, and packed her tools with care. Gold leaf, extra buttercream, spare flowers, ribbon wire. At 9 that night, Vanessa called, her voice cold and tight. When Harper said she would drive the cake herself to keep it safe, Vanessa sighed as if Harper had invented a problem. She told her not to show up looking like delivery staff, and to use the side entrance so she would not ruin the photographer's venue shots. Then came the deeper cut. Vanessa told her not to mention she had made the cake. Grant's family, she said, was used to a certain level of vendor. The word settled in the room like ash. Harper reminded Vanessa that she had asked for the cake. Vanessa dismissed that too, saying she had been generous by letting Harper feel included. Then she told Harper not to be starved for attention on her big day. The line went dead before Harper could answer. She stayed in the kitchen until midnight, dreading morning. At dawn, gray and wet, she packed the delicate tears into a rented van paid for with the last of her credit. As she drove toward Newport, cold waves crashing against the stone walls of the estates, she realized how much she had spent trying to buy love from people who would always treat her like a transaction. She ignored the impatient drivers honking behind her on the winding cliff roads, keeping the van steady to protect the cake. The Quinn estate rose over the Atlantic, all white stone, long windows, silk tents, and gold chairs. At the service entrance, the frantic wedding planner, Elise, came out with 2 assistants. But when Harper opened the back of the van, Elise stopped speaking. Harper braced herself. Then she saw awe on the woman's face. Elise looked at Harper and called the cake extraordinary. For one brief second, the validation made Harper's throat tighten. Then Vanessa's sharp voice cut through the air. She appeared in a white bridal robe, already moving toward the spotlight. Vanessa stood with her hair perfectly styled, her face glowing with the ease of someone who had never had to earn the room. When Elise praised the cake and mentioned Harper's work, Vanessa's eyes flashed. She laughed lightly and said Harper had only helped coordinate. Harper felt the air leave her lungs. Vanessa leaned close and whispered, "Not today." No scene, a reminder, sharp and private, of where Harper was expected to stand. Harper walked down the service hallway with her repair kit in hand. In the ballroom, surrounded by roses and expensive light, she had never felt more alone. Behind her, Vanessa was already telling Elise to keep the vendor list simple. Under the warm reception lights, the cake stood like a monument. Even the caterers paused to admire it, never knowing the exhaustion behind every tear. Harper adjusted the final peony with trembling fingers. Down the hall, Vanessa's laughter rang out, bright and rehearsed. Harper retreated into a cold guest bathroom, where the cheap silver dress pulled tight at her waist. In the mirror, she looked like a shadow, trying to belong to a world that had already refused her. Outside the door, 2 bridesmaids paused. "Is Vanessa's sister in there?" One whispered. "She's kind of sad." "Isn't she?" A small hollow laugh followed. Harper pressed her hand against the cold sink until the whispers faded. She refused to cry. Tears left marks, and marks brought questions from Celeste, whose concern always came with needles hidden under velvet. Harper fixed her lipstick instead. Downstairs, Celeste looked her over from head to toe. "This dress is a bit tight in the wrong places," she murmured. Harper's cheeks burned. "You chose it," she whispered. "Vanessa chose it," Celeste replied. "I only approved it. Try not to stand near the front during photos. The light is unforgiving." Just then Preston walked in, his eyes passing over Harper without warmth. His silence hurt more than an insult. Preston checked his watch and reminded them that the groom's family was already at the church, then warned Harper not to be late. She wanted to scream that she had been awake for 2 days, making sure the wedding was flawless. Instead, she promised she would be there. The ceremony took place in an old stone church by the water, where the wealthy arrived in polished cars. Harper slipped inside and found no seat reserved for her. She stood behind a massive arrangement of white hydrangeas, grateful for the shadow. As the organ began, Vanessa walked down the aisle on Preston's arm. He looked at her with a pride he had never once offered Harper. Vanessa moved like seafoam, born to be adored, while Harper gripped the wooden pew and remained invisible. It was not the designer dress Harper envied. She did not want the groom, the titles, or the life measured in expensive flowers. She only wanted, just once, to walk into a room without feeling like an apology for existing. The vows passed in a blur. She clapped with everyone else, her small applause swallowed by the crowd. As guests drifted toward the reception, she stayed behind on the stone steps, letting the cold ocean wind sweep over her. Her phone buzzed, showing Roman's name in an old thread. No message, just his presence lingering like a thought she had not invited in. She locked the screen. At the estate, the glowing tents shimmered under the dark sky. Inside, the cake waited at the center, beautiful, perfect and silent. At the edge of the lawn, Harper looked at her work. For one breath, she saw it the way the guests did, a masterpiece. Then a woman in emerald silk stepped beside her, sighing over how divine it was. She said Vanessa had told her the cake had been flown in from a Paris atelier. Harper watched the lie move through the party, dressed more elegantly than the truth. The woman praised Vanessa's exquisite taste. "I made it," rushed to Harper's lips, pressing against her teeth. But the guest was already looking past her, searching for someone more important. Harper closed her mouth. Across the tent, Vanessa laughed beneath the lights. Harper stepped back into the shadow of a floral column, while the ocean crashed coldly against the cliffs below. The band played on, and the cake stood beneath the lights, with Harper's invisible fingerprints hidden beneath every flower. She lingered near the edges, close enough to hear the praise, far enough away to remain what she had always been, present but never truly included. A waiter passed, and she took a glass of champagne just to give her shaking hands something to hold. She watched the bubbles rise in restless lines, as if even they wanted to escape. Across the lawn, Vanessa moved easily through the crowd, Grant's hand resting on her back. She accepted compliments for the flowers, the music, the view, as if beauty itself had arrived for her alone. Harper watched from the dark as her sister laughed beside the stolen masterpiece. Grant's mother reached out to touch a sugar peony, and Vanessa gently caught her wrist, warning her that they were delicate. Harper almost laughed. Vanessa had no idea how fragile they were. She had not spent sleepless nights, holding her breath over each petal, praying the sugar and wire would hold. But she knew how to claim what looked beautiful. That, Harper thought, had always been her talent. Then Celeste's voice cut through the air. "Why are you hiding?" "Harper, I'm just staying out of the way," Harper said. Celeste sighed and leaned close. "Fine is what people say when they want attention, but are too proud to ask for it." Harper tightened her grip on the glass until she feared it might break. The old apologies rose in Harper's throat, but she swallowed them. For half a second, Celeste looked almost concerned. Then it disappeared. "Let your sister have her happiness," she said. Harper watched Vanessa pose by the cake. "She has everything," Harper murmured. Celeste warned her that bitterness made her look small. Harper met her mother's eyes. "I said she has everything." Celeste smiled with polished cruelty. "Some women know how to receive life. Others wait for the world to bend around their feelings." Harper looked back at the cake, at the sister who had taken it, and felt something inside her quietly stop begging as applause rolled through the tent. Celeste put on her public smile and told Harper to stand somewhere appropriate. Then she walked away. Harper stood frozen while Vanessa stepped forward to speak, her beaded dress catching the light. She thanked everyone in a voice that trembled with just enough grace to charm the room. Harper listened, shoulders tight, waiting for her own name, though she already knew it would never come. There are moments when the heart keeps leaning toward people who have already turned away. That night, Harper finally felt how much it hurt to keep reaching. At the edge of the room, Preston watched her carefully, as if her silence were another detail he expected to control. Vanessa turned toward the towering wedding cake, and the crowd followed her gaze with warm laughter. No one looked at Harper, the sister who had poured herself into it. They applauded as Vanessa credited the masterpiece to a fictional Parisian bakery called Maison Lumière. Then came the cruelest part. Vanessa thanked Harper only for helping with the errand and carrying the boxes. The crowd gave a polite chuckle, light and harmless to them, devastating to her. Harper felt her face go hot, then cold. Her glass trembled, spilling champagne. From across the tent, Vanessa caught her eye. For 1 second, her smile shifted into a private warning. "Know your place." As the speeches continued, Harper stepped away toward the mansion, desperate for any room without the suffocating glow of people who belonged. Before she reached the side entrance, Preston's voice stopped her. Her father stood nearby, silver hair perfect, leaving his wealthy friends with practiced politeness to corner her. A word with Preston. It was never a request. Harper followed him into the library, a room built more for judgment than comfort. Behind them, the party kept laughing, as if nothing important were happening. Preston closed the door without looking back. Harper noticed the envelope in his hand before he spoke, and a cold dread moved through her stomach, between dark wooden shelves. Preston handed her a white envelope and said her behavior that night required immediate action. She opened it. Her vision blurred as she read the formal eviction notice. 30 days to vacate the apartment she called home. When Harper protested, Preston simply sat behind the desk, folding his hands like a judge who had already heard enough. To him, her low rent had been temporary generosity. He would no longer fund the illusion of her future. He said he had given her years to become respectable. She had chosen kitchens, flour, and uncertainty instead. Harper stared at him, realizing he did not see a daughter. He saw a failed investment, desperate to be seen. Harper brought up the wedding cake, the work she had given everything to create. Then she learned he had known all along. When she asked why he had allowed Vanessa to lie, his answer was simple. It is the story that suits the room. In their world, talent was not talent. It was a hobby, useful only when it served someone else's image. Preston leaned back and explained that families like theirs survived by controlling appearances. A Quinn did not air private weakness in public. A Quinn did not beg for credit. Harper understood the message beneath his calm voice. Vanessa's lie was acceptable because it protected the family brand. Harper's truth was dangerous because it exposed the people behind it. To her father, Harper had only mixed frosting. She had made something useful, he said, and should not confuse usefulness with achievement. The word echoed in the quiet room. Useful, not gifted. Not worthy. Convenient. Harper looked at the paper trembling in her hands and understood that he had chosen that night on purpose. He wanted her to feel his power while the music played outside. He wanted proof that no matter how well she performed, he could still take away the floor beneath her feet. When he tried to dismiss her, she found the strength to say no. Preston's eyes narrowed. Not because she had shouted, but because she had finally stopped obeying. There it was again. The language of her childhood, where love sounded like a lease agreement with hidden penalties. Holding the notice, Harper whispered that she needed to leave, but Preston ordered her back to the reception to behave. In the bright hallway, she ran straight into Celeste, and the look in her mother's eyes told Harper she had known. Celeste told her to stop making a scene. Her father, she said, was acting out of concern. Harper stared at her. Family was not supposed to feel like a transaction. Love was not supposed to come with terms and conditions. Celeste lowered her voice and reminded Harper that Preston could still make things worse. Celeste stepped closer, careful to shield their drama from the guests. Harper was 27, she said. She could not keep floating through life and hoping talent would save her from growing up. To Celeste, Harper's work was still just playing with sugar. Claiming the cake would only make her look desperate. Then came the soft poison. Not everyone was meant to shine. And there was dignity in accepting a place in the background. Harper looked at her mother's hand and remembered a lifetime of being guided aside, gently and firmly, for someone else's comfort. This time, she pulled away. Celeste's face changed for 1 second, startled by a daughter who had finally stopped making herself easy to move. Celeste could only blink as Harper walked out into the biting Newport night. She crossed the sloping lawn toward the black ocean crashing against the cliffs, vast and indifferent to her pain. Her hands shook as she opened her phone, scrolling past her family's names until she found Roman. He was a dangerous, impossible lifeline, but she called anyway. When he answered and said her name without disappointment, it nearly broke her. She whispered an apology. His voice sharpened with instant concern. Harper could hear movement on the other end. A door closing. A man's order cut short. Roman did not ask why she was calling. He only listened. And somehow that made the night feel less empty. A heavy silence stretched over the line, broken only by the distant click of a door. When Roman spoke again, his voice carried a quiet, dangerous weight. "Are you hurt?" Harper looked at the eviction notice in her hand, the betrayal written in formal language. "I don't know," she whispered. Roman exhaled slowly, controlling something dark. "Stay where I can find you." After the call ended, Harper stood in the dark and watched the glowing tent where her family celebrated without her. For 30 agonizing minutes. She wondered if she had been foolish to trust him. Then the music stumbled, as if the musicians themselves had seen a ghost. The laughter died first. A cold whisper moved through the crowd faster than the ocean breeze. 3 black vehicles rolled through the gates, unhurried and commanding. When Roman Calder stepped out, the night seemed to shift around him. He wore a dark suit, open at the collar. No tie, no performance. His eyes swept over the guests, and people parted as if they had no choice. He ignored the wealth around him and walked straight to Harper, who stood frozen against the stone wall. He did not look at her stained dress or the crushed paper in her hand. He looked only at her face, searching for the damage done by the people who claimed to love her. For one brief second, his hard expression softened. "Who made you cry?" he asked, low and dangerous. Harper tried to answer, but the words caught. Instead, she handed him the eviction notice. Roman read it without expression, which somehow made his anger more frightening. Then he turned toward the tent, his eyes finding Preston Quinn. Harper followed because the air felt too heavy to stand still. Preston met them with the polished calm of a man used to buying his way out of consequences. "Mr. Calder, I don't believe we've been introduced." Roman stopped. No, the single word cut through the air. When he held up the notice, panic crossed Celeste's face, and Vanessa watched in horror. Preston insisted it was a private family matter. Roman did not let him hide behind that. "If you humiliate her in public, we can keep the rest public too." Vanessa pleaded with Harper to stop him, fear shining in her eyes. But Roman did not look at Vanessa. He looked at Harper, giving her the choice, with 200 silent guests watching. Harper took a breath. "I made the cake," she said. Her voice broke the quiet. "I crafted every sugar flour by hand. I tested the buttercream 6 times. I stayed awake for nearly 3 days in a rented kitchen because my sister demanded perfection. There is no famous bakery in Paris. There is only me, the invisible sister they chose to use." The silence under the tent was deafening. Harper looked straight at Vanessa and said she had stolen the credit. Vanessa tried to defend herself, claiming she had only wanted to protect the event. Harper laughed, a bitter shaking sound, when Preston ordered her to stop. She did not lower her eyes. She looked at her parents and her sister, finally seeing the truth clearly. The silence they had always demanded was never about manners. It was about control. "I have spent my life being useful when you needed me, and invisible when you didn't," she said. "I smiled when people forgot my name, because it was easier than admitting my own family forgot me first." A guest gasped. Grant looked at Vanessa as if a beautiful illusion had cracked in front of him. Preston flushed with anger and warned Harper she was making a scene. Harper smiled. "Yes," she said. "I am." She kicked off her heels and felt the cold, honest earth beneath her bare feet. Holding her shoes in one hand and the eviction notice in the other, she turned to leave. When Preston tried to step forward, Roman shifted just enough to block him. "Do not follow her," Roman said, his voice soft and lethal. "Do not send your lawyers or your cowards." Preston sneered and asked what authority Roman thought he had. Roman only stared at him. "I brought mine with me." As Harper walked toward the driveway, the crowd parted in absolute silence, forced at last to look at the woman they had ignored, at the car. Harper looked back at her cake one final time. It no longer belonged to them. It stood as proof of what she had survived. Roman stood beside her and asked where she wanted to go. "Somewhere they can't make me small," she said. She stepped inside. As the door closed, cutting off the noise of her old life, Roman gently took the eviction notice from her hands. They drove away from the mansion, the stolen praise, and the beautiful cake that had finally told the truth. Harper stared out the window, not yet healed, not yet certain, but no longer willing to shrink. Behind them, under the tent, the applause never returned. Roman sat beside her, still as stone. He had folded the eviction notice into his coat as if hiding it could undo the wound it had left. But some things cut too deeply to disappear. In the heavy silence of the car, Harper felt hollowed out. Her shoes were somewhere in the grass, left behind with the girl who had kept trying to earn a place at her family's table. She looked at her reflection in the dark window and whispered, "I ruined her wedding." The words came from habit more than truth, from years of being trained to apologize for every discomfort she caused. Roman did not answer at once. He let the silence prove it would not punish her. Roman watched her reflection. No, the word cut through her shame. When she reminded him that he had seen the mess, his answer was steady. He had seen a woman tell the truth in a place built to punish her. Harper whispered that Vanessa was still her sister. Roman answered gently that blood did not make someone innocent. Looking down at her bare, grass-stained feet, Harper realized she had nowhere to go. "Tonight you come with me," Roman said. "Tomorrow you decide what home means." She looked back once. Through the rear window. At the headlights of Roman's men following like quiet shadows. For once, the shadows were not there to trap her. Boston rose ahead. Silver and black against the restless harbor. Roman's high-rise stood severe and private, far from the judgment of the night behind them. In the mirrored elevator, Harper held her shoes and looked like the survivor of a shipwreck. Roman stood beside her, quiet and dangerous in a way that no longer felt aimed at her. His penthouse surprised her. There was no loud display of wealth, no cold marble trying to impress. Only wood floors, deep windows, and city lights trembling on the dark water. The silence inside did not feel empty. It felt protected. Harper hated how much she needed that protection, and hated even more that Roman seemed to know it without making her say so. The penthouse was warm with a low fire, and the kitchen was so clean it looked untouched. Harper stood by the doorway and offered to find a hotel. Roman's steady gaze made the truth impossible to avoid. 30 days to leave her apartment. Almost no money. A family she had walked away from. She had nothing solid beneath her. Roman did not press. He simply went to the kitchen and asked when she had last eaten. Her stomach had been twisted with dread all day. She had forgotten she had a body at all. As he took out eggs and bread, Harper realized that accepting basic kindness might be harder than enduring cruelty. Because cruelty at least felt familiar. You don't have to eat it all, Roman murmured, watching butter melt in the pan. Harper sank onto a stool at the kitchen island, her hands resting on the cold counter as he moved with quiet precision. He toasted bread, poured hot tea, and placed the simple meal in front of her without ceremony. The plainness of it nearly undid her, after a wedding overflowing with expensive food that had offered her no comfort. This toast was the first real warmth she had felt in days. As she ate, tears filled her eyes. Roman stayed back and let her have the quiet. He did not touch her. He did not ask for gratitude. He only made sure the tea stayed warm. Later, when Harper asked why he had come, Roman looked out over the dark harbor before answering. He reminded her that he had promised to help, and unlike the people in her life, he meant what he said. When she said he barely knew her, he told her he had seen her crying behind a loading dock because her mother had dismissed her like staff. "You were being erased," he said, his eyes holding hers. "I know exactly what that feels like." Harper felt a sudden urge to know what had made him into a man who understood invisibility so well. Roman did not offer the story yet, but the silence around him told her it had teeth. Midnight had passed, and Harper felt her world cracking open. She whispered, "Thank you." Roman said she never had to thank him for believing what he saw with his own eyes. In the guest room, she peeled off the heavy silver dress and let it fall to the floor like discarded armor. In the mirror, her bare face looked fragile and exposed. Her phone kept buzzing, with messages from the family she had embarrassed. At last she turned it face down. Peace for once mattered more than answering people who had never listened. She slid beneath the cool sheets and slept until sunlight touched the floor. In the morning, the world would still be broken. For now no one was asking her to fix it. Morning brought the memories back in sharp pieces. The microphone, the dark car, the crowd opening around her. Her phone showed 46 missed calls and a flood of demands for apologies. The old habit tugged at her. Smooth it over. Take the blame. Make everyone comfortable again. Then a soft knock broke the spell. Roman stood at the door in a simple black sweater, holding coffee. He reminded her that she had every right to leave those messages unread. In that moment, she chose not to crawl back into the role they had written for her. She set the phone on the nightstand, screen down, and let it buzz unanswered like a trapped insect. Without his suit jacket, Roman looked tired, like a man who had slept little. Harper followed him into the kitchen, where warm pastries and fresh coffee waited on the counter. She noticed the silver wedding dress folded carefully into a bag instead of thrown away, a small kindness that touched her more than she expected. On the island lay a folder, a lease agreement for a red brick storefront in Boston's historic North End. 6 months paid. A commercial kitchen. A beginning so large it frightened her. Harper did not touch it at first. Gifts from powerful people had never been free in her world. And Roman Calder was powerful enough to make even generosity feel dangerous. Harper stared at the lease, her heart pounding. I can't go from my father controlling my apartment to you controlling my business, she said, already bracing for the trap. Roman's eyes sharpened, but not with anger. With respect. Good, he said. If you hadn't thought of that, I would worry. He did not ask for gratitude. He offered boundaries. The business would be in her name. Repayment terms would be written down. She would hire a lawyer who disliked him enough to keep him out. Real support, he made clear. Did not require surrender. It gave her room to stand. Harper studied his face, searching for the catch, and found only patience. If you want an investment, it's an investment, Roman said. If you say no, the folder closes. His voice held no pressure, which made it harder to mistrust. I don't want your obedience. Harper, when she asked what he did want, his answer struck deep. To see what you build when no one is standing on your hands. A fierce longing rose in her. She saw sugar flowers under warm lights. Contracts with her name alone. Boxes marked Harper Quinn. Not a family legacy. Hers, she admitted she was afraid. Roman only said, I know by noon. Mara Ellis arrived. Ready to turn that fragile possibility into something real. Mara shook Harper's hand with a firm, no-nonsense grip. Roman told me you're brilliant and underprepared, she said. That's workable. For the first time. Questions about Harper's future did not feel like attacks. They felt like tools. What did she want to sell? Did she know the cost of butter by the pound? Harper's voice grew steadier as she described custom cakes. Careful craft, and her own name on every box. When Roman left the room, Harper exhaled. Mara noticed immediately. He frightens you, she said. Good. He opens doors, but he doesn't force you through them. If you build this only because he wants it, you'll fail. If you build it because you would bleed for it, Mara continued, you might have a chance. Harper looked down at her napkin sketch. A window, a counter. Her name, I would. She whispered. That afternoon, quiet Nico Varela drove her to her old apartment. Inside, she saw the evidence of a life built around lack. Milk crates holding baking tools. A narrow bed. Worn shoes by the door. Nico handed her a box. Tell me what matters. She knew immediately. Her tools. Her mixer. Her notebooks. Packing those recipe pages felt like gathering pieces of her own soul. Years of midnight tests. Lavender and lemon. Brown butter and pear. Then a loud knock shattered the silence. Harper froze. Nico stepped in front of her and opened the door halfway. Celeste stood in the hall, coat buttoned perfectly, face tight with anger. Nico remained polite but firm. Miss Quinn is packing. She doesn't want company. Celeste ordered Harper to make him move. For a second, years of old training clawed at her. Then Nico murmured, You don't have to. Harper stood and met her mother's eyes. I might be making a mistake, she said, clutching her notebook. But it will be mine. Celeste hissed that Roman had poisoned her. Harper shook her head. No, he believed in me. Tried to understand the difference. Celeste looked as if the difference was exactly what frightened her. Celeste's mouth opened. But nothing came out. Nico closed the door, cutting off the past. Harper stood frozen until her mother's footsteps faded, then sank onto the bed as her knees gave way. Nico quietly picked up another box. Not bad, he said. For the first time, holding a boundary felt like winning. Together they loaded 27 years into his car. 4 boxes and 1 battered mixer. Standing on the sidewalk beneath her old window, Harper expected grief. Instead, she felt space open in her chest. By evening, she stood before the dusty storefront in the North End. Roman silent beside her. Her entire old life fit into the back seat. The key to the next one waited in his hand. Roman waited as Harper peered through the dirty glass. It was not beautiful yet, but in her mind, she could already see it. A sleek display case, warm tables, a kitchen alive with sugar and heat, boxes stamped Harper Quinitelia. "You like it," Roman said. Harper looked at the dusty floors. "I'm terrified." His mouth curved. That wasn't the question. For the first time in days, a real smile returned to her face. "Yes," she said. He handed her a small brass key. It was not a magical rescue. It was only a key. But when her fingers closed around it, her spine straightened. The room smelled of dust, old brick, and possibility. Roman stayed near the entrance and let Harper claim the room. She ran her hand along the cold steel counter. In her mind, the place was already alive. Flour in the air, sugar flowers drying, her own body tired but free. Her phone buzzed with a text from Vanessa. "You really think his money makes you somebody?" The old pain flared, then faded. Harper turned the screen off. "Trouble?" Roman asked. She looked at the peeling walls and knew the answer. "No," she said softly. "Just noise." For 3 weeks. She drowned out the noise and learned the hard language of renovation before sleep. Every new invoice scared her. Every unlocked morning brought her back. Permits, grease traps, electrical loads. They were the heavy, practical words of adulthood. And Harper did not feel ready for any of them. Every morning before sunrise, she stood in the doorway with coffee in one hand and fear in the other. Around her, the old neighborhood woke slowly while her shop sat stripped and wounded. But the key worked in her hand, and that was enough to bring her back each day. Mara arrived with her leather planner and sharp truths. "You cannot spend $18 on packaging for a $9 pastry," she said, holding up the beautiful box Harper loved. Harper stared at the box like it had personally betrayed her. "It looks beautiful," Mara added. "But it also looks bankrupt." Harper sighed and took the box back. Mara softened just a little. "Beauty was not the problem," she said. "The math was." So Harper learned. She learned which city offices needed 2 copies and which needed 3. She learned to stand between patronizing deliverymen and Nico and say, "The oven goes where I say it goes." Nico did not smile, but his eyes showed respect. Roman stayed a quiet mystery, keeping his distance yet sending help exactly when she needed it. He did not try to steer her path. He only cleared enough of the storm for her to keep walking. "Most people knock," Harper said one night through the open door. "Most people close before midnight," Roman answered, his voice low and steady. She told him she was different. His quiet reply hung in the cool air. He stepped inside carrying a paper bag of warm, garlic-scented bread that filled the empty shop at once. "I brought dinner." Harper protested that she had already had coffee. Roman looked at her. "Coffee is not a meal." It was such a simple sentence that it almost made her laugh. Or cry. She was still learning that dreams and adrenaline could not keep a person alive by themselves. "That must be frustrating for you," she teased. Roman set the bag down and admitted it was becoming increasingly so. She laughed. Sudden and bright. Surprising them both. For 1 second. The hollow shop felt less like a gamble and more like a place where something real had begun to breathe. They ate sitting on overturned paint buckets. 2 mismatched people in a half-built world. "You chose well," he said, looking around. When she mentioned that her father had called, the room tightened. "He said I was being influenced," she admitted, staring at her hands. Then she added the part she had not wanted to say. Preston had warned her that respectable people were already asking questions. "He said I have no idea what kind of man you are," Harper added. Roman held her gaze. "He's not wrong." Silence settled heavily between them. "Then tell me," she said. His eyes darkened with something older than pain. I can't tell you everything, he replied. But I can give you enough to decide if you should run. Harper caught her breath. Should I? Yes. Roman said. But you won't. His honesty frightened her, but she did not move away. He looked toward the unfinished kitchen and admitted he had built his name in brutal rooms, places where mercy was treated like weakness. Harper understood then that Roman was not asking to be excused. He was warning her honestly. Harper listened. Roman did not pretend to be misunderstood. I won't insult us both by lying, he said, when she asked if he was dangerous to her. He answered at once. No, then he added. I am dangerous near you. Harper held his gaze. Can you let me decide when I need protection? Roman's jaw tightened. I can try. That's not a yes. No, he said. It's the truth. A week later, Harper hired Tess Rowe, a 22-year-old with a sharp tongue and hidden tattoos. Tess had worked in cafes and in a grocery bakery she called the Graveyard of Pastries. She looked at Harper's half-finished shop and grinned like trouble. Tess looked around the unfinished shop and said it would be real pretty. Not just rich pretty. By the 5th week, the gamble had begun to feel like home. Cream walls, dark wood shelves, and warm brass lights turned the room into a small sanctuary. In the kitchen, the new oven gleamed like a promise. Harper spent long nights baking lemon rosemary tarts and delicate pastries topped with sugar flowers so thin they trembled when she breathed. Tess and Mara tasted everything. Nico quietly ate 4 almond cookies when he thought no one noticed. Roman tasted last and pointed to a small black cherry and almond cream cake. This is the one people will remember. Harper took a bite and hated that he was right. Harper took another bite and knew the cake worked. Bitter cherry. Soft almond. A finish that lingered. The soft opening arrived on a rainy Saturday morning. She expected 20 people. By 8:30, a line curled past the window. Her hands trembled until Tess nudged her toward the door. Across the street, Roman stood under a black umbrella with Nico. He did not come in. He only watched through the glass, leaving the victory to her. Harper unlocked the door. The bell chimed for the first time, and warmth rushed into the room. She moved on instinct, boxing pastries, taking orders, smiling until her face hurt. When the first customer said her name, she nearly dropped the box. There are moments when being seen can reach backward and soothe years of neglect. Tess moved behind the counter as if she had always belonged there. A stranger in a navy raincoat bought a lemon rosemary tart, took one bite, and whispered that it tasted like spring after a terrible winter. By 1 in the afternoon, the display case was empty. Harper stared at the bare shelves, realizing she was no longer merely tolerated. She had been chosen. When the room broke into awkward, sweet applause, tears blurred her vision. Outside, Roman watched through the window. He did not clap. He placed one hand over his heart. Harper held his gaze through the rain, then turned back to her customers. That silent gesture stayed with her. 2 days later, a glowing review put her name in print, calling her work a triumph that turned sugar into architecture. Harper read the words 3 times, letting herself feel the warmth. Then an anonymous post began spreading online, whispering that her shop was bought with dirty money and pity. Tess showed her before Harper could find it herself. A message from Roman made her smile. But then a second call came in. Preston, the smile disappeared. She let it ring. On the 3rd attempt, she answered and stepped away from the light into the kitchen shadows. Her father's cold voice treated her success like a cheap stunt meant to embarrass him. Preston warned her that men like Calder did not invest in women like her without a price. Women like her. The phrase was meant to cut her down, but for the first time. There was not enough room inside her to keep his cruelty. She looked toward Tess, who was humming off-key in the front room, and said she knew exactly what being used felt like. It felt like spending 61 hours on a masterpiece only to be hidden. When Preston accused her of dragging the Quinn name through mud, her answer was quiet but steady. She was finally existing without his permission. He warned her that protection vanished when men grew bored. And the words hung in the dark like a threat, with men like Preston. Warnings and threats wore the same expensive suit. Before hanging up, Harper told him she was no longer as alone as he had trained her to be. Her hand shook, but not from regret. 3 nights later, darkness struck back. Before dawn, she found the front window shattered, cold air blowing through the broken mouth of her dream. On the floor lay a brick wrapped in black string, surrounded by glass and broken sugar petals that looked like scattered teeth. The note attached was full of poison, calling her a shame to the family name, and warning customers not to trust a woman bought by Calder money. Rage, hot and clean, tilted the room. When Tess arrived 10 minutes later, she stopped in horror at the damage. Tess stepped forward, shoes crunching on glass, but Harper told her to stay back. Only then did Harper notice the blood. A thin red line cut across her palm where the note had sliced her. She had not called Roman. But he arrived before the police had finished taking photographs. When he stepped through the broken doorway, the whole room seemed to freeze. His eyes locked on her bandaged hand, and a dark silence settled over him. Harper tried to calm him, explaining that the police and insurance were already handling it. Roman lived by different rules. He turned to Nico and gave one quiet command. Find out. Even the officer stopped writing. The words fell like a blade. Harper stood her ground and said no. The room went still. Roman was furious. Someone had attacked her business and threatened her life. His coldness frightened her. But she looked straight at him. She understood what his mind wanted. A name, a locked room. Enough fear to make sure it never happened again. Her voice shook, but her will did not. She told him she was not territory to be defended with blood. She knew he cared. She knew he was angry. She also knew that when Roman Calder got angry, people bled. A heavy silence pressed against the broken walls, while everyone watched them face each other. Even the officer felt the tension in the room. Roman stepped closer, his voice dropping, as he reminded her that she had asked him to let her decide when she needed protection. He said he was trying, even if he was doing it badly. Harper's chest tightened. Then try better. It was a fragile bridge between two damaged people. At last, Roman relented. He told Nico to gather footage and touch no one. By morning, plywood covered the broken window. Tess stood outside with black paint and wrote 3 stubborn words across the wood. Still here. Still baking. By noon, the neighborhood had fallen in love with the defiance. By evening, strangers were leaving flowers, coffee and cash in a jar by the door. By nightfall, the story had spread. Reporters gathered outside, and Harper spoke with a raw honesty no one could buy. When asked whether her family was behind the attack, she refused to say Preston's name. She only said some people were more comfortable when women stayed where they had been placed. Later that night, Roman appeared in the quiet kitchen doorway. He had found the culprit, a security contractor tied directly to her father's empire. Harper turned off the water and closed her eyes as the truth settled into her bones. A foolish, fragile part of her had still hoped Preston had a line he would not cross. Now she knew he had simply been waiting for a better cover. When Harper asked what Roman had done, he said he had done nothing violent. He had given the proof to the journalist. Harper stared at him. He had chosen her way over his own instincts. Then he stepped closer and admitted that he had spent his life protecting what was his. Harper warned him gently that she was not property. The air thickened with something beautiful and frightening. Roman spoke the rawest truth he had ever given her. He said he did not know how to care for someone without preparing for war. The admission did not make him softer. It made him more human. And that frightened Harper in a different way. The powerful man in the tailored suit looked, for once, like he was bracing for a blow that had not come. "Who taught you to be like this?" Harper asked, His eyes drifted to the window. My father, he said, his voice even but heavy. He ran our home like a prison. Rules, punishments, silence. My mother learned never to ask for gentleness, and I learned never to need it. At 15, I became the thing in the room everyone feared most. Harper stepped closer. I don't need you to control the room, she whispered. I just need you to stand in it with me. His dark eyes softened. Something moved through Harper more deeply than any command could have. Roman reached for her wrist, his fingers unexpectedly gentle as he wiped flour from her skin with his thumb. It was a small, almost formal gesture. There was none of the violence people attached to his name, and yet she felt it in her bones. When he tried to let go, she caught his hand. He froze. Harper rose onto her toes and kissed him. For one breath, he went completely still. Then his hand moved to her cheek, slowly enough for her to pull away. She did not. The kiss deepened. Tasting of coffee, restraint, and a darkness she could not name. When they parted, she whispered, I kissed you. Roman's thumb brushed her cheek. Tell me to leave if you need me to. Harper closed her eyes. She had spent her life being pushed, arranged, corrected. Now a dangerous man stood in her kitchen, waiting for her permission. Stay, she said, choosing her own storm. The next morning, the article about the contractor went live. It did not name Preston, but the connection and timing were enough. Messages flooded her phone. Preston remained silent. The shop, however, had its busiest day yet. People came for the scandal, but they stayed for the food. By afternoon, the case was empty. Near closing, the bell rang. Vanessa walked in wearing a camel coat and sunglasses, carrying the cold expression of someone entering a place she had already decided to hate. Harper stood behind the counter and faced her sister. Vanessa removed her sunglasses, revealing tired eyes. So this is it, she said. Harper wiped her hands on a towel. This is it. Vanessa looked around at the cream walls, brass lights, and neat boxes. It's smaller than I expected. It's bigger than where I started, Harper replied. Tess stood ready to defend her, but Harper signaled for her to stay quiet. Vanessa stepped closer. You have made a mess of everything. Investors are asking questions. Grant's mother cried on the phone. The wedding is being treated like a public trial. It felt like one, Harper said. Vanessa snapped. You could have handled this privately. Harper looked at her. I tried privately my whole life. The truth landed hard. Vanessa looked away, suddenly less polished. Then the mask returned. You think applause means they care about you, Vanessa said. Harper folded the towel. Calm in the storm. No, I think applause means they finally saw the work. Vanessa looked at the empty display. And what happens when they stop looking? The old wound throbbed. But Harper did not flinch. Then I keep working. For a second. Grief hung between them. I needed that wedding to be perfect, Vanessa whispered. Harper's voice softened. No, you needed everyone to believe you were perfect. Vanessa had no answer. As a customer left and cold Boston air slipped inside, Vanessa put her sunglasses back on. You've changed. Yes, Harper said. Vanessa walked out without buying a thing. Through the window. Harper watched her pause on the sidewalk and look back once, not at Harper, but at the sign above the door before vanishing into the night. Later, after the ovens cooled and the shop went dark, Harper sat alone with a cold cup of tea. Her laptop chimed with an email from a national bridal magazine. The subject read, Feature request. Harper Quinn Atelier. They wanted to photograph her work and interview her about artistry, authorship, and the cake that had started a quiet revolution. Beneath the plywood sign that read Still Here. Still baking. Harper rested her palms on the rough wooden table and began typing her reply. The first draft was too polite. She deleted it. The second sounded like a contract. She saved that version for Mara. The third came more slowly, shaped by a steadier part of her. She wrote that she would do the feature, but only if the focus stayed on her labor and her craft. She would not let her family's cruelty be turned into entertainment. The work mattered. Her name mattered. For years. She had been trained to make herself agreeable before she made herself honest. Now she was done making her truth small enough for others to step over. She added one more line before sending. If they wanted scandal, they could interview someone who had stolen from her. She sent the email as written. The shop stayed quiet. No one appeared to punish her for honesty. And the small chime of the sent message felt almost sacred. The next morning, Mara read the email over coffee and nodded. Good, Harper waited for more. That's it. Mara said. I'm practicing restraint. Tess leaned over the counter with a smirk. It sounds classy and terrifying. Very on brand. By noon the magazine agreed to every term. No family drama. No stage tears. The profile would focus on Harper's work, her process, and why women's labor was so often hidden behind prettier names. Standing in the warm kitchen, phone in hand, Harper felt something shift. She had claimed her story before anyone else could shape it. Still, panic returned, cold and sharp. Being ignored had been painful, but it had also been safe. Being seen meant being judged. Harper could already imagine Celeste tossing the magazine aside and calling her dramatic. Later, Roman found her standing over untouched sugar petals. You're thinking too loudly, he said. Harper looked up. That sounds like something a man says when he has no idea what I'm thinking. He stepped closer, his coat damp from rain. You're wondering if attention is a trap. He was right. And she hated it. In the kitchen, with the smell of vanilla and lemon in the air, and plywood over the window. Roman looked too dark, too large, for such a soft room. Harper placed one sugar petal on the drying tray. I wanted them to notice my work, she said. Now they are. And I feel like I'm standing in front of a train. Roman met her gaze across the table. Then don't stand on the tracks. It was annoyingly simple, but survival often was. He looked around the flour-dusted kitchen, at the boxes, the tools, the evidence of her devotion. This isn't danger, he said quietly. This is living. You're just not used to it. When Harper told him she had named the cake The Unhidden, something like pride flickered in his eyes. He did not rush to praise her. He gave her room to breathe first. Show me, he said. So she did. The cake was tall and strong. Not fragile. Ivory buttercream covered the tiers in clean lines, while sugar peonies climbed upward, blooming wider with each level. Threads of gold crossed the sugar like light finding cracks in stone, ending in a single unfinished blossom. On a gray Thursday morning, the magazine crew arrived with heavy equipment and loud voices. Tess pretended not to be impressed. Mara stood guard. Nika watched from outside. Roman did not come in. He sat in his car across the street, visible only when the light caught the glass. He was not trying to crowd her or take credit. He was waiting to be invited. And for Harper, that restraint mattered more than any grand speech. Claire lowered her camera and stared at the sugar blooms. Who taught you to do this? She asked. Harper touched the wooden table. No one. I taught myself because real flowers die. But sugar can outlast the rooms that underestimated them. During the 3-hour interview, they talked about technique, invisible labor, and the weight of putting her own name on the door. When Claire asked whether the Newport wedding had started her career, Harper looked toward Roman's car and shook her head. No, it was the last time I let someone else write my story. At that exact moment, the camera clicked. 2 weeks later, the photo ran. Harper in her cream apron, standing beside her cake. In the photo, She was not smiling to make anyone comfortable. She looked directly into the lens. Fierce and real. The headline read, Harper Quinn builds cakes that refuse to disappear. Almost overnight. The bakery filled with orders. Planners emailed. Brides called. A Manhattan hotel asked for a tasting. Then came the offer that made her hands go still. The Boston Harbor Hotel wanted Harper to create a 5-tier cake for its winter charity gala. Preston's name sat on the sponsor list near the top. Mara looked over the contract and smiled thinly. This is not just an order, she said. This is a room your father cannot easily control. Harper accepted before fear could talk her out of it. 2 days later, the Ho called back with sudden hesitation. A board member had raised concerns about reputational risk. Another had asked whether Harper's shop had the capacity for an event of that scale. By evening, the contract was on hold. Tests were loud enough to scare a customer. Mara quietly found out what had happened. Preston had not canceled the order outright. He had done something worse. He had leaned on donors, whispered about Roman, and suggested Harper was unstable. The old Harper would have folded. This Harper put on her coat and walked straight into the hotel lobby. Preston was there for a private donor meeting. Surrounded by men who laughed at the right places, and women who watched everything without seeming to. Harper found him near the marble staircase. For a moment, she saw the father who had taught her to lower her voice. Then she saw the man trying to steal her future in quieter ways. You can dislike me, she said, keeping her voice steady. You can be embarrassed by me. But you do not get to call my work a risk after using it to decorate Vanessa's wedding. Preston's smile did not move. This is not the place. Harper looked around at the polished room. That's what you always say when the place has witnesses. The conversation died around them. Preston stepped closer, speaking through his teeth. You think one article and one shop make you untouchable. Harper's hands trembled. But she did not hide them. No, I think the truth makes you nervous. She handed him a printed copy of the hotel contract, with her signature already on it. I will make that cake. If the board cancels. They can say it in writing and explain exactly why. Preston's eyes darkened. For the first time. He had no soft room. No closed door. No envelope to hold over her. Just marble. Witnesses. And a daughter who would not move aside. Tess appeared in the kitchen doorway the next morning, holding her phone like it might explode. You okay? She asked. Harper nodded slowly. I think so. Tess held up the screen. The hotel had confirmed the order. Then she lifted a tray with a warm pastry. I saved you the ugly croissant. The what? Harper asked. A small smile breaking through. The one that looks emotionally complicated. Harper laughed. And for the first time in years, the sound felt completely free. 3 days later, Vanessa arrived after closing. No sunglasses, no expensive coat, just jeans, a dark sweater, and a tired face without makeup. The bell rang while Harper was wiping down a table. Vanessa stood there, awkward and out of place. We're closed, Harper said softly. Vanessa stepped forward and laid a small ivory card on the wood. It was one of Harper's business cards. The edge bent from being touched. I kept it, Vanessa said. Why? Harper asked. At first, to hate it. Then, because I didn't know what to do with the fact that you didn't fail. Vanessa looked up, her polished mask broken. I waited for you to come back. I told myself the shop would close and you'd realize you needed us. Harper's voice dropped. I did need you. Vanessa looked down. You needed a sister. I liked having someone beneath me. It was ugly. But it was true. I stole the cake because I wanted the beauty, without admitting it came from you. The bakery was quiet around them. Two sisters sat among the ruins of the relationship they had been pretending was still intact. Under the table. Harper dug her nails into her palm to steady herself. Across from her. Vanessa cried and admitted how bitterly jealous she had been of Harper's real life. Vanessa had lived in a hall of mirrors, terrified that if people stopped looking, nothing would be left. Harper felt the grief of all those years and said quietly that she could not forgive her yet. Vanessa did not argue. She nodded. Harper stood, placed 2 pastries in a white box, and tied it with black ribbon. Sometimes healing begins not with forgiveness, but with the end of pretending. Harper held out the box. Vanessa took it gently, as if it might break. "This isn't forgiveness," Harper said. Vanessa nodded. "Then what is it?" Harper glanced at the receipt on the table. Vanessa let out a wet, genuine laugh. A brief echo of their childhood before everything had become sharp. After she left, Harper stepped into the cool night air and found Roman waiting beneath a street lamp, hands deep in his pockets. He had stayed outside, respecting her need to stand on her own. The hotel confirmed, Harper told him. Roman's smile was small but real. "Then your father just learned. The door doesn't close when you stop asking permission." The broken window was replaced with clean glass, and the shop hummed with life. Harper's hands were always tired, but her heart felt full. One evening, a young bride sat across from her, twisting her ring and whispering that the wedding cake did not need to be special because she did not want to be a burden. Harper recognized that defeated voice immediately. She had lived in that quiet prison for years. She slid her pencil across the table and said, "Tell me what you actually want." Later that night, she locked up and found Roman waiting by the curb. No grand gesture. Just a man leaning against his car in the cold, careful not to enter until she invited him, Roman murmured as she approached. "And yet you're still waiting," Harper replied, stepping closer as the street lamp silvered his dark hair. He had stayed outside to let her work, giving her the space she had fought so hard to earn. With a soft smile, she told him about the Boston Harbor cake, 400 guests, gold and ivory sugarwork, and Preston forced to sit in the room while her name appeared on every program. Roman looked at her, his gaze softening. "There she is," he whispered. Once those words would have hurt. Now they belonged to a past she had outgrown. Harper touched his coat and told him she loved him. Roman went still. The city seemed to quiet around them. "Harper," he said, "I'm not hesitating because I don't feel it." "Then why?" she whispered. Roman's voice dropped. "Because when I say it, I need you to understand what kind of man is saying it." Harper held his gaze. "I do." His hand touched her cheek, tender and careful. He had loved her before she believed she was worth defending. She had loved him after he learned she could protect herself. He kissed her under the street lamp, holding her like someone chosen, not taken. A year later, Harper delivered a breathtaking 5-tier cake of gold and ivory to a ballroom by Boston Harbor. It was not a copy of the cake from her past. It was its beautiful cousin, strong, luminous, and unmistakably hers. The event coordinator checked the paperwork. "Cake artist Harper Quinn." She read aloud. The words hung in the air, clean and undisputed. Across the ballroom, Preston stood among donors with a glass in his hand and no power over the sound of her name. During the reception, the chairwoman took the microphone and thanked Harper first for creating the cake. The gala committee had nearly lost because some people mistook reputation for character. A ripple moved through the room. Preston's face tightened. Harper stepped out from the shadows of the service entrance and let herself be seen. Across the ballroom, Roman raised his glass with a quiet smile. This time, she did not look away. Later on the breezy harbor terrace under the midnight sky, Roman joined her without a word. He asked if she still wanted to disappear. Harper looked back at the ballroom, at guests eating cake with her name on the menu, at the staff moving around a creation no one had stolen. "No," she said. The answer was simple, and she had earned it. Soon the Quinn name changed. It no longer meant Preston's fallen empire or Vanessa's wedding scandal. In the North End, on a cream-colored box tied with black ribbon, Quinn meant almond, cherry and sugar flowers that looked alive. It meant a woman who had put her name on the door and kept it there. Early one morning, Harper found Tess already inside, soft music playing as she piped buttercream. "You're early," Harper said. "You're late. It's 5:30, Tess teased. "Exactly," Harper replied, laughing as she hung up her coat. The ovens warmed. Coffee brewed. Outside, the city slowly woke. Soon there would be consultations, invoices and sugar flowers to sculpt. Real work. Harper wiped a smudge from the glass and looked at her reflection. She was no longer the girl in the silver dress, the sister hiding in the background, or the daughter waiting for permission. She was just Harper. Behind her, the kitchen filled with golden light. Outside, Roman's car pulled to the curb. He held 2 coffees and waited for her smile before opening the door. Harper unlocked it, the bell chiming softly. As the morning opened around her, no part of her tried to shrink.